Yesterday, rumors started to go a little bit crazy about a particular superstar caliber player that could potentially be dealt over the offseason, and I'm sure you all know who I'm talking about at this point if you were on Twitter yesterday. We'll obviously get into that more a little bit later, but it kind of got me thinking, who are some other high-profile, star-level players that we could see traded over the summer? So I came up with a list to go over for this video, but as always, if there's any other big-name players that you feel like we could see traded over the offseason that I didn't talk about in this video, be sure to let me know down below in the comments section. And let's just go ahead and start things off with the player that has been in the news recently, and that is David Pastrnak of the Boston Bruins. Now, this kind of came out of nowhere. Obviously, Boston decided to move on from Bruce Cassidy the other day as their head coach, and there's been a lot of talk recently about the Boston Bruins potentially entering a rebuild. The future of Patrice Bergeron is obviously very uncertain. Brad Marchand is going to miss a ton of time to start next season, same with Charlie McAvoy. The core is aging, and they don't really have any blue chip prospects who are, expected to come in and save the day and really be the future of the team. I'm going to read you guys a little bit of an article posted to The Athletic by Boston Bruins beat writer Fluto Shinzawa. I'm not 100% sure if that's how you say his name. I hope I didn't butcher it, but one of the things that was written in the article, the Bruins could start the 2022-23 season down their first line combination and a Charlie McAvoy-Matt Grzelcyk pairing that at times has served as their number one duo. A coaching change, surgeries to critical contributors, and a pending rebuild will not encourage David Pastrnak to sign an extension with 1 year left on his deal. In fact, the right wing may be general manager Don Sweeney's best trade piece to trigger a teardown. And now for what in my opinion is the more interesting part, after the 2019-20 season, Torrey Krug's contract was expiring, Bruins general manager Don Sweeney did not stand in the way of the defenseman's exit to St. Louis. A year later, David Krejci's deal was up. Upon season's end, Krejci considered relocating his family to Czechia. Sweeney did not make it worth the center's while to change his mind. In both cases, David Pastrnak was watching. 88 has seen how Don has treated his two best friends. A source close to Pastrnak wrote The Athletic in a text, "No chance he comes back with Sweens as GM." So definitely some pretty interesting stuff in there. Obviously, there's a good chance nothing comes of this, and Pastrnak does end up signing an extension with the Boston Bruins. I'm sure Don Sweeney is going to try to make that happen, considering Pastrnak is one of the best wingers in the National Hockey League, and he's still very much so in the middle of his prime. But if stuff does hit the fan and David Pastrnak doesn't want to stick through a potentially really tough season in Boston this upcoming year and doesn't plan on signing an extension, then it would probably make sense for Sweeney to test the market, because losing a player like Pastrnak for nothing as a UFA would really hurt. Moving on now to the next player, we have the one and only goaltender in this list, John Gibson of the Anaheim Ducks. Obviously, Anaheim made it very clear at the most recent trade deadline that they're looking towards the future. They're still very much in the middle of a rebuild, despite being pretty competitive this past season. They sold off the likes of Josh Manson, Rickard Rakell, Hampus Lindholm, all of which were in the final year of their contract, were set to become UFAs. Now, John Gibson isn't in the same situation as those guys because he's still signed through the 2026-27 season at a cap of $6.4 million. He's 28 years old, but how long is it going to be before the Ducks start to come out of this rebuild and get back to being a playoff contender, a Stanley Cup contender? Is John Gibson going to be a part of that when it happens? Is he in their plans? If you're Anaheim and you know you're most likely not making the playoffs this upcoming season, and there's a guy like Connor Bedard coming up in the next NHL draft, maybe it's best for them to completely tear it down for this year. And I feel like for them to do that, they would most likely have to move on from John Gibson. Although over the past couple of seasons, Gibson's numbers haven't been elite like we were used to, from 2015 up until 2019, he's still a guy that's going to give it his all every single night, and most nights give you a chance to win, keep you in the game. So John Gibson is definitely a name I think you should keep an eye on this offseason as a potential trade candidate when you consider where the Ducks are headed, and I feel like he's a guy that would garner a lot of interest if he was on the trade market from teams that, need a longer term solution in net, probably like the Edmonton Oilers. The next player we have to talk about is a guy who got a lot of attention at this most recent trade deadline but never ended up actually getting traded. That is JT Miller of the Vancouver Canucks. Had an incredible season this past year, just shy of 100 points. He had 99 in 80 games. He's 29 years old, heading into the final year of his contract, and pretty much the only reason why I have him in this video is just because of how much talk there was about the Canucks potentially moving JT Miller at the trade deadline. And now with him entering the final year of his contract, I feel like if you can't get an extension done with JT Miller this offseason, it's probably best to explore the idea of trading him and just putting it out there, seeing what you could potentially fetch in return, because if you wait until, let's say, trade deadline of the upcoming season, you'll probably get a much lesser package than what you would get if you traded him, say, over this offseason at the draft or something. Moving along now to the next player, we have Kevin Fiala of the Minnesota Wild. Now, of all the players we're going to talk about in this video, he he's probably the one that I feel most confident in the fact that he will get traded over the offseason. He's a restricted free agent in need of a new deal, just had the best season of his career in which he had 85 points in 82 games. He's 25 years old. Obviously, that's a player Minnesota would love to re-sign, would love to keep around, but they may just not be able to. This offseason, the buyout penalties for the Zach Parise and Ryan Suter contracts kick in, and the Minnesota Wild are going to be cap-strapped for a very, very long time. You're already paying Kirill Kaprizov $9 million a season. Can you afford to pay Kevin Fiala what he's going to be asking for, which I'd imagine is probably north of $7.5 million a season, when you're going to have, $14 million or whatever the exact number is in dead cap space for the next however many years. As far as teams go that would potentially pursue Kevin Fiala, there's some names being thrown out there. The New Jersey Devils, the New York Islanders apparently would have a lot of interest. The Los Angeles Kings name is being floated around as well. I'd be really intrigued to see what a return for Fiala looks like, because you could probably fetch a pretty high draft pick, but also if you're the Minnesota Wild, you have Kirill Kaprizov locked up on the type of contract he's on, you're probably not really looking to rebuild. You probably still want to remain competitive. So I would imagine they would want at least one piece back that they could use to help them win now, just albeit a cheaper piece than what Kevin Fiala is going to cost. Continuing on now, next up on the list, we have defenseman for the Arizona Coyotes, Jakob Chychrun, another name that was brought up a lot, leading up to this most recent trade deadline. Now, as we all know, he remained in Arizona. I feel like a lot of that had to do with the fact he was injured as well, but I do still feel like there's a really good chance we could see Chychrun traded over the offseason, and I feel that way for a couple of reasons. Number one, Arizona could probably get a pretty ridiculous haul in return for Chychrun. He's on one of the more team-friendly deals in the league. This is a guy who got Norris Trophy votes in the 2020-21 season. He's only 24 years old as well, so it's not like you can only trade him to a contender. This is a guy who fits the timeline of most likely every single team in the league, except for actually maybe the team that he's on, the Arizona Coyotes. And the second reason I feel like he could get traded is I feel like he'd have no problem getting dealt. I mean, the Arizona Coyotes aren't going to be winning anything anytime soon. They're literally going to be playing in a college rink for the next however many years, a rink where they can't even have their own logo at center ice for their home games. And like I mentioned earlier in the video, there's this guy named Connor Bedard coming up in the next draft, so I'm sure Arizona is going to want to try to give themselves the best chance possible at drafting him. And now for the final player we're going to talk about in today's video, we got centerman Mark Scheifele of the Winnipeg Jets. I actually made a video about a month ago about the idea of a potential Mark Scheifele trade coming soon because of some of the things he had to say during the Jets exit interviews. If you didn't watch that video, basically some of the things he had to say, it was in reference to him having a meeting with Kevin Cheveldayoff the following day. Mark Scheifele said he just doesn't know, he has to understand where the team's going, he has to do what's best for him in his career, that kind of thing. And it just didn't sound like a guy who was fully committed to being a Winnipeg Jet, especially with him, being one of the leaders of that team. Mark Scheifele's been a guy who basically ever since 2016 has been at or around or a little bit above a point per game player. He's on a really good contract, making just $6.125 million a season, and is still signed through the 2023-24 season. If the Jets do go the route of trading him, I would expect they would get a pretty significant return. And if you're somebody who's been subscribed to the channel for a while, then you would know that I'm kind of in the ballpark of the Jets should trade him. I feel like that's what they should do. I feel like they should shake up that core, trade one of the big name players, because it just isn't working. Ever since they made the Western Conference Finals in 2018, and then got swept, I think they got swept or lost in 5 to the Vegas Golden Knights. It's been downhill since then. It really seems like their window with this core has closed, so I'm going to be interested to see what the Winnipeg Jets decide to do, what direction they decide to head, and, especially what they decide to do with Mark Scheifele. So that is going to wrap up today's video. Those were 6 star NHL players that I feel like could potentially be traded over the offseason. Like I said at the beginning, I'm really interested to hear your guys' thoughts, so if there's anybody that you can think of that I didn't talk about in today's video, be sure to let me know down below in the comment section. And while you're down there, if you could, please drop a like on the video. I would really appreciate that. It's the best way to show your support. And most importantly, if this was your first time checking out the channel and you want more NHL content just like this, be sure to hit that subscribe button, and I'll talk to you all soon.